What's going on, guys? Johnny aka Tropical Fish Guy here. Today we're going to be talking about quarantine fish tanks. Quarantining your fish, why you need a quarantine tank, why you don't need a quarantine tank, hospital tank. Stay tuned. Alright guys, so first of all, what is a quarantine tank and why you need one, okay? Or you don't need one. Well, a quarantine tank and a hospital tank. Well, first of all, let's talk about the difference between a quarantine tank and a hospital tank. Is there a difference? Depends on who you ask, really. As always in this aquarium industry, you get one dude saying this thing, one dude saying that thing, and then you're like, what do I do? So, to me, the difference between a quarantine and a hospital tank is a quarantine tank you use to quarantine new fish that come in. You could also use it as a hospital tank. If you see a sick fish in your aquarium, you put it into the quarantine/hospital tank. They could be the same thing, right? But the main difference is the quarantine tank, what I'm going to use it for is I'm going to put new fish that I get into a quarantine process, which takes a couple of weeks to a month to make sure that they're not sick, because I'm dealing with, camellianus worms in my main tank, a 30-gallon tank. Why would you need a quarantine tank? Save money, right? These medicines and stuff, they're expensive, right? I mean, so it says treat 1 pack of this per 10 gallons of water, right? And you got a 30-gallon tank, that's 3 packs. When you could say, I got a 10-gallon tank, I'm gonna treat 1 package, right? And you save a whole bunch of money. You can put a few fish in there, treat them as well. Unfortunately, maybe you have to treat your big tank, but preventatively, I'm gonna set up this tank and use this as a quarantine tank for fish to be treated before they go into my main tanks, okay? Now, do you need a quarantine tank? If you only have 1 tank and you only want 1 tank, like if you have a 10-gallon tank, I'd say, maybe not. I mean, unless, depend on the circumstances, unless, right, you've got fish, you got invertebrates like shrimp, which are very sensitive to some medications. You got snails maybe, which are very sensitive. Chances are that if you treat your main tank with a shrimp or snails or even plants, they're going to die from some medications. A lot of medications contain copper, which will kill your shrimp, kill your snails, kill some plants, right? In the high levels, plants need a tiny, tiny bit of copper, but not in the levels of medication. So a hospital tank could be, to me, a temporary setup, going back to the difference between quarantine and hospital. Hospital tank could be like if you're treating a fish for a few days, right? Or maybe up to a week. Or sometimes even longer, you do water change, whatever, to get the ammonia out. But a hospital tank, if you're dipping your fish or just treating them for a short amount of time, you don't even have to do like a 10 or a 5-gallon tank. You could do something like a big Tupperware bowl or something and put an air stone in there, dip your fish in there, watch them for a day or two, that kind of thing. It'd have to be bigger than this, but as an example. But that's a hospital tank for me, It's a very temporary thing. You can break it down and use it when you need it. When you see a sick fish in your tank, you put it in there, watch it for a few days, medicate, a very small container to save money on that very expensive medication, right? So today we're going to set up a quarantine tank, and I'll show you how to set it up. And if I can think of any differences or any benefits or anything like that, I'll let you know along the way. That's what I could think of off the top of my head. But you leave me a comment and you tell me what the difference is, if there's a difference in your opinion. A lot of people say, dude, you're crazy, man, it's the same thing. Okay, fine. It may be the same thing to you. It's a little bit different for me. And as I explained, the reasons I think they're different, but they're what you'll normally hear, right? If you're pretty new to the hobby, you'll normally hear those terms intermixed, and then you might think, hey, this dude doesn't know what he's talking about, whatever. I kind of have a differing opinion on a lot of things, as you might know if you go through my videos, and I hope you do. I've been not a scientist or nothing. I'm just a dude with the camera, right? But I've been doing this for like 30 years. Yeah, 30 years. So I kind of know a little bit. I'm not going to say I'm an expert, but whatever. Let's set this quarantine tank up, okay? What you need is a small fish tank, maybe a 10-gallon if you got one laying around, or if you get at the PetSmart or Petco, I think it's a Petco $10 per gallon sale. You get one for 10 bucks. You need some kind of lid because fish do tend to jump out. You could use saran wrap or something like that, or some kind of plastic top or whatever. Doesn't need too much light, because you're not growing plants or anything in here. No gravel. No gravel. That's the difference between a regular tank and a quarantine tank or hospital tank, whatever. You don't put gravel in there because, for example, if they have some intestinal worms or something and you kill the worms, you don't want those stuck in the gravel causing ammonia spikes or anything. You'd have to, get rid of the gravel, suck up the gravel, whatever. So no gravel. Plus it's easier to scoop the fish and stuff like that, move them in and out, that kind of thing. So no gravel. You want a few decorations just so the fish don't get stressed out, and whatever decorations you got will work. I got some of these fake plants in there. I wouldn't use real plants, like I said, because if you're going to nuke it or something with some copper, it'll kill the plants, and you don't want that. So you'll need some kind of filter. Like in the hospital tank, you don't necessarily need a filter, but in the quarantine tank, it's going to be set up. So the difference between quarantine tank and hospital tank is a quarantine tank stays up, to me. A hospital tank is a temporary thing that, you put up and you treat the fish and then you take down if you don't want another tank, right? First of all, if you just want one tank. And if you want it to be, you want to save room, save space, because I had to find this red filing cabinet here. It's pretty solid. It's steel, good old American Pennsylvania steel, right? So it'll handle the weight of the fish tank. We bought this because it's fireproof, and all of our important stuff goes in there. So it's a solid piece of work there. So what you need is you need a filter. I prefer for a quarantine tank a sponge filter, because it holds a lot of bacteria in there. And everything that I use except for the tank, I'll put links in the description below. So sponge filter, all right? And to run the sponge filter, you need an air pump, right? This air pump I just had laying around, but I'll put a link in the description for something similar maybe. This one in particular has two output valves, or two outputs. So I'm going to put the sponge filter. You need an air stone. You would want an air stone because a lot of medicines, what they do is they suck up all that oxygen from the water, and so you want to be able to oxygenate and get that gas exchange. This does a little bit, and one might be enough, but for me, putting that medicine in there kind of stresses them fish out, so I do both. Overkill maybe, but I want to make sure the fish are safe and stuff. So, but we'll see. I'm gonna put a beta in there just to cycle the tank. And speaking of cycling the tank, another difference, right, is that a quarantine tank will be a fully cycled fish tank, right? So you're gonna need to cycle it, build up the bacteria in there. Whereas a hospital tank, you're not gonna need a fully cycled tank, right? If the water gets cloudy, you just pour it out. Since it's a very small container, pour it out and put some new water in there and put some more medicine in there, right? Or, after you're done, you just break it down, pack it up, wait for the next fish to get sick, whatever. So, anyways, sponge filter. Very good for biological filtration, which means the bacteria builds up on this sponge right here, right? Just a sponge. This is rated for, the link I'll put in there is rated for, and it's pretty cheap, I think. It's like, 8 or 10 bucks or something, I'm not sure. But it's a China filter. You can get different kinds, whatever, but this one is rated for 10 to 25 gallons. I wouldn't do this for a 25 gallon, maybe a 10. I think minimum is 10, and you can get bigger ones, but maybe 15, 20, maybe 20, but I wouldn't go 25. But what you'll also need is some airline tubing. Airline tubing. So you connect the airline tubing to the pump, boom, and then you connect. First, what I'll do is you take this plastic piece, what it does. Okay, so how the sponge filter works, right? What the sponge filter does is you connect the tubing through the hole right there. First through this right there, like this. Don't put this on first because you'll have a hard time trying to stick that airline tubing through there. So stick it in through here, like this. And what that does, once you connect it in right here, through that hole right there, okay, and then put, oops, blooper. Then you put the plastic piece on there, like that, okay? So what that does is as the air gets pumped into here, right, it causes bubbles to come up. As the bubbles come up, it takes the water with it, so it sucks in the water through the sponge out the tube. So it's causing water flow. Yeah, pretty cool, huh? Set that in there. Right. And you want to use as little airline tubing as you can, just so that the air pump doesn't have to push all that air through. You're going to take this, you're going to plug it into the air pump, and you'll need scissors. So you take the scissors, position the air pump where you want it, give it a little bit of extra slack because you're going to move it around some. Cut like that, plug in the air pump, push that through the hole on one of those outlets, then hide your air pump somewhere. In this case, in the back of the aquarium, right? So it sits in the aquarium. I'm going to just stick it in the corner right here. And then it filters the water, just like that. And I'll show you it in action here in a second. So I did probably use a little too much airline tubing, but that's okay. You could always cut it off, but I'm not going to. And then the second thing you do is, like I said, you put the air stones in there, and I'll put all this stuff in the link in the description. So you pretty much do the same thing with the airline tubing. And like I said, a lot of people will say you don't need both the sponge filter and the air stone. You might not, but I do it just to make me feel good, you know, because I'm making the fish feel good. When the fish feel good, I feel good. You take that and you put it into the airline tubing. Might be hard, just push it in there, no big deal. And then you take a suction cup, okay, because the airline tubing will hang like this, and in the water it'll kind of always tends to creep up, and you keep on pushing it down and you're like, So at first thing, just get you a pack of suction cups. They're pretty cheap, couple bucks. I'm not sure how much they were. I'll put a link in there. All right, take you a suction cup, looks like this. Put your airline tubing through that suction cup. Boom, that's it right there, through that connector thing. Let me show you again. See that connector right there? You just stick that airline tubing through. That's it, right? Then you connect your airline tubing to the other side. And you put that in there, and once the water gets filled up, you'll be able to suction it in there. Okay, you got your plants. You connect your airline tubing to the pump. This time I will cut it off. Let's see here. Airline tubing about right there. Cut it off right there. Alright guys, that's it. Pretty simple there. Alright, so when it's about halfway full, you'll see that the sponge filter, you know, and you wring out the sponge filter and it'll sink. It starts to bubble. Your air stone, you use that suction cup right there, and it'll stay at the bottom to go up. The reason why you want to stay at the bottom is not to be a hassle, number one. Also to get all the air flowing from up to down to make a circular pattern so that so it has good gas exchange, right? And so when you're halfway done, what you need also is a heater. The reason why you need a heater is because when you're treating fish, especially in a hospital tank, but even in a quarantine tank, a lot of parasites, they don't like hot water. So that's a part of your effective remedy to get rid of those parasites. So for this 10 gallon, the general rule is 5 watts per gallon. So 5 times 10 is 50. So I've got me a E-High 50 watt heater. You can get any brand. This one's submersible. You have to submerge it fully, at least to that line. So sideways, it's going to go in like that. I'll show you how that's set up. All right, you plug in the heater. You'll see the little dot. I think you can see it. That little dot's on. It says, hey, I'm heating up. And that's the reason why I filled it up first with water, because you don't want to plug in your heater without sticking it in water first, because it'll just get real hot and crack and explode in your face, and you don't want that. Next thing you need, make sure the heater's at the right temperature. If it doesn't have a thermometer on there, get you a thermometer. They're like a couple bucks. I mean, they're real cheap, maybe $1, right? So here's a cheapo thermometer. It either sticks on the side of the tank or it floats around. Usually it loses suction and it floats around anyway, but I'm gonna try and stick it on the side of the glass. You just read it like you read the thermometer that you used to stick in your kid's mouth, you know. Back when I was a kid, that's what they did. I think they got the laser ones now, but anyways, stick that in there. Kind of where you can see it. Like that. I mean, so you can see it at a glance. This isn't a display tank, so you're not going to be showing off these fish, so it really doesn't matter what the tank looks like as long as it's a functional quarantine tank, right? Okay, so we got the heater in there, thermometer, they got the filter, got the air going. The air is agitating the water surface as well as the bubbles from the sponge filter, so that's fine. That's no big deal. Some fish, like betta fish, doesn't like the surface agitation that much, so you can put some plants, floating plant, not real, but fake plants like I got here. Because maybe I'll put a few guppies in there or something. You can use what you might want to do, which is a good idea, and I'm going to do, but if you don't have a spare tank, you can use the Fritzheim number 7 for freshwater and Fritzheim number 9 for saltwater. It's the bottled bacteria, and I'll definitely leave a link in the description, because that stuff helps cycle the tank faster. So it's about time I rinse this sponge out here anyway. Let's see here, do I have a sponge I can rinse out? So I'm going to take, first, I'm going to go ahead and fill up with water and then dechlorinate the water. All right, so it's mostly filled up all the way. I typically don't fill it up all the way until I'm completely sure, because there's a couple of things I'm going to do to stick my hand in there still. So we need to dechlorinate the water. Grab your favorite dechlorinator, whether it's Prime or whatever. I use the Ammo Lock. I've been using this for decades. This has never failed me. That and the Amquel. I'll put a link to this in the description below. One capful per 10 gallons, and the good thing about this, it's hard to overdose, so I usually put 2 capfuls per 10 gallon. Just to be sure. It depends on the strength of the chlorine in your water. How do you know the chlorine in your water? You test it. But I'll put a link to a Tetra test kit that has the chlorine in there. A chlorine test in there. Alternatively, you can let this run for a day or two, 24 hours is fine. And it will, since you have the air stone in there, it will naturally let the chlorine diffuse out into the air. But I always keep that Ammo Lock in there anyway, because I'm always doing water changes and stuff with the multiple tanks. Okay, so that is sitting there, and that is ready to go. So I'm going to make sure the water, and the temperature, right? What temperature do you do it? I didn't even say. So it depends on the fish. Guppies, bettas is what I'm probably going to put in there first to cycle the tank. They like it pretty warm, but also, like I mentioned a little bit previously, the parasites, some of the parasites like ick, the white dots on the fish, they don't like hot water, so I put it in at 82, for me. Look, do some research. So depending on the type of fish, like if you got like white cloud minnows or other type of fish that like colder water, I wouldn't put it that high. But for me, I'm sticking to 82. And you can let this run like this for a day just to make sure that the temperature is right and everything like that. I'm going to and dump in the bacteria at this point. If you had it, I don't have it, so I'm going to use old filter from one of my current tanks that needs a good cleaning anyway. This dechlorinated water now, so it won't hurt the biological filtration too much. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to take this sponge filter. See this? The sponge filter, the pre-filter I've got here, a little sponge, it captures all the big particles before it goes up. I'm going to take that and squeeze out the good bacteria. I might even take some of this stuff here. We don't want to overdo it. So take that sponge. Right there, that stuff there, that's the good stuff there. That's what you want, okay? And then just bring it over here and just squeeze it near that. Look at that. That's the good stuff. Look at that. You're like, ooh, gross. No, that's the stuff you want in your tank. That's the bacteria that you like. And it'll coat, and you're just squeezing it. It's dechlorinated water, so it's not going to hurt the bacteria. And this also, you want to do this anyway, maybe whenever it gets clogged. I mean, I don't want to say a time frame. For me, it's every couple weeks, depending on the load of your fish. I'm going to put that back in there. You could take some of this stuff out here, right here, but I don't want to overdo it. You always got to be careful about your biological filtration, so I'm going to put that back. Let's see if I've got another one, because the more bacteria you start with, the better, right? So look at that. See how cloudy, brownish, cloudy? I don't know if you can tell. I've got all that muck floating around. That should be good right there. That's the good stuff. That's what builds the bacteria, and this sponge filter is going to get all that bacteria seated in there. That's the key. That's the trick. That's nature. That's nature right there. So that's what you want. Yeah, that's what you want right there. All that guck and muck and whatever from that one little tiny filter, right, that we squeezed in there. That's the good stuff. And if you don't have another tank, the best thing is to buy the Fritzheim number 7 for a freshwater tank, and you just pour some stuff in there according to the directions. I usually, for a 10-gallon tank, I buy the small bottle, shake it up, and pour the whole thing in, or I usually buy the big bottle too on a bigger tank, but I'll leave a link in there. But as you can see, very mucky. That's the good stuff. That's the good stuff. All right, let me give you a close-up. Yeah, that might be a good picture of all that stuff from that filter floating around. Eventually it'll settle, okay? You want it to settle, that's fine. That's fine, that's not a big deal. It's going to get caught up in this filter, so you can see the filter is already catching that stuff. That's good. And let it grow, right? And even in a regular tank, when you set up a regular tank, and if you have another tank with a filter, that's what you want to put in there to get it started. But no gravel, that's fine. As a matter of fact, that's preferable, so if you see worms coming out of your fish's butt or something like that, easily vacuum them out without having to guess where they are in the gravel. So there you have it. So there you have it, guys. That's how you set up a quarantine tank. Of course, I'm going to add some fish in here, maybe a few guppies, and I'll show you that here in a second. Well, before I do that, you might want to let it run for 24 hours or so, just to make sure that everything gets mixed up, that the heater is not overcooking or anything like that, but I've had that heater set for a long time in a different tank, so I know what the temperature is. It should be right at 82, but I've got the thermometer in there, floating around, just to make sure. I'm gonna go ahead and put some fish in there. Hold on just a second. Yeah, I'm gonna put some fish in there from the pond. I'm sure they got something. If they're outside, you know, assume they got something. If they're from a fish store, assume they got something. If they're from your friend, assume they got something. If they're from a different tank you got, assume they got something. I mean, I'm just that kind of guy because I've seen so many things happen. Just assuming that, oh, these fish are from my friend's tank and they look so great, but you never know. You know, for example, like guppies, they can, if they're in a nice, good environment, they can live with camellianus worms for years, months, a long time, without even showing signs. Unfortunately, mine are showing signs, and I'll do a video about that later. But, and then we'll talk about the quarantine medicine that I use. And you know, another alternative to cycling the tank is you can grab a filter from another tank, like that one, and stick it directly on there. It already has all that biological bacteria built up. If you got a spare filter laying around, which I don't, so this is the way I do it. All right, so I bagged up from the pond. I bagged up this nice looking betta here. Pretty cool, blue veil tail, huh? I'll show you that one as he gets out. And a few of these little bitty plain looking guppies. Might be a nice looking endler in there. Yeah, there's a nice looking endler in there. That's pretty cool. So yeah, these guys are gonna cycle the tank and live in there and, you know, be happy. Gonna get medicated every now and then, you know, so that'll be all right. Normally, probably not the beta, but he needs medicated right now, so perfect opportunity for the medication. So I'm gonna leave them in for 15 minutes and then release them. All right, about 20 minutes later, I'm thinking that I'm gonna let these go, but I'm thinking that that water agitation on the top is gonna be too powerful for this beta, so I might have to do something else with this beta, but he needs to be treated because I'll show you why. He's got worms coming out of his butt called camellianus worms, and they're hard as heck to kill. So I might do a video on, I'm already working on a video on camellianus worms coming out of the butts of guppies. Might as well add them to the list. And I'll show you a picture right here just of the, well, I might show you in the tank. So what you do anyway, you let this float for about 15-20 minutes, and then you pour the water out of the bag into a net, and then dump the fish in. Bloop. Same thing here with these guppies. Yeah, he's resting right there. He's chilling. But we're going to have to get those worms out of him. They're intestinal parasites. They latch on to the intestine. They suck the blood out of the fish. And they die a slow, miserable death. Yeah, sounds pretty cool, doesn't it? No. There you go. There's there's like an endler and 5 guppies. I'll show you. Yeah, there's a few guppies there. See here, there's a guppy there. And there's the beta struggling at the bottom there. And I will put up I'll let them chill there for a minute, but I'll put up a picture of what those camellianus worms look like sticking out of his butt. Let's see, can't see there. Yeah, and they're hard to get rid of too, but I'll do a video on how I am getting rid of them. So just in case you want to know, I'll put a link somewhere if it's ready. If not, if I do this video first, check on the channel. After about 10 minutes or so, he's up and about, swimming around, hunting around, looking for something to eat. So he's doing fine, except for those worms there. I might have to turn down the air a little bit because it is a little bit of current for him, but we'll keep track of him. All right, so even though he has the camelina swarms, we're going to go ahead and let this tank cycle. Hopefully it doesn't take too long. And how do you know when it's done? So what happens is the ammonia spikes, right? The nitrite spikes. The ammonia kind of goes down as the bacteria eats it. The nitrites go down. At that point, you can safely say that the cycle's over with, and then that's when I'm going to dose these fish. So I estimate, since I've poured a bunch of bacteria in there from this old tank, probably, 10, 15 days maybe, hopefully sooner. But I don't want to, even though this is a new tank, I don't want to dose the medicine in there while it's cycling, because the cycle itself is stressful for the fish as well as the medicine. But a lot of people do, and they report good results. So it's up to you, however you want to try it. But I don't, because I feel like one thing to stress them is enough. But if you add a second thing to stress them, then you know that's too much for me. But you decide. Give me a like. Let me know if you need a quarantine tank. If not, just as hospital tank will do. Let me know what your comments are about it. Let me know anything. Ask me anything. So give me a like if you like this kind of stuff. Subscribe to the channel if you like fishy stuff. And hit that bell notification as always. Share this with someone who needs to set up a quarantine tank. And hit me up on the Instagram at the Tropical Fish Guy. And if you want to support the channel, go to fishytees.net. I'll put a link up here. Get you a cool shirt. Anyway, thanks a lot so much. I really appreciate you guys. I don't tell you enough. Thanks for watching, and happy fish keeping. Peace. There you are, ladies and gentlemen, Camelina worm sticking out of bottom of this vent. Yep, Camelina worms. Once this tank cycles, I'll go ahead and treat him. He's been in the pond, so, but actually, yeah, right there. You can see a few of them right there. Yep. So I'm waiting on the medicine to get here, but first we want the tank to cycle. But we got to test the water. We got to test the water, like I said previously. Throughout this process, I'll test it here in about 3 or 4 days to see where the cycle is, and then weekly after that, like I said, the ammonia goes up and all that stuff. But I'll leave a link below for a test kit. You guys want to, I would suggest that you guys invest in a test kit, whether it's Tetra test kit, API test, whatever. You want to be able to test the ammonia, nitrites, pH, nitrates at a minimum. The Tetra one has the chlorine stuff in there too, and hardness, so whatever. And I'll do a comparison of those one of these days, but either one's fine. But the point I'm trying to make is that throughout the whole process, about every week or so, you want to chart the process of the ammonia, the nitrite, pH, and the nitrate. So if you got any questions, you know what to do. Leave me a comment. I try to answer all the questions. So thank you.